As you know, yesterday and today we held talks with representatives of the OSCE leadership, the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Switzerland, who is the country's chairman in the Security and Cooperation Organization in Europe, and the General Secretary of the OSCE, Mr. Senor Leoglu. In principle, we communicate quite regularly with our Swiss colleagues. The previous contact took place in September last year at the 80th session of the General Assembly. Then Mr. Cassis announced that he would like to visit Moscow in connection with the election of the Swiss acting chairman in 2026. We, of course, supported this intention. Yesterday and today, the talks were frank. The Swiss colleagues and their secretaries understand the difficulties they will have to overcome, given the deep crisis in the Security and Cooperation Organization in Europe. The reasons for the crisis are well known, but we discussed them in addition and responded to some of our interlocutors' questions. The crisis in the Security and Cooperation Organization is causing damage to the discussions in areas that need to be considered annually. The topics that do not fall within the scope of the organization's competence are causing damage. It would be a waste of time to make another Ukrainian mistake and report to those who are in charge of this process. The OSCE is based on the principle of equal and indivisible security, which has been repeatedly proclaimed at the highest level by the OSCE. This includes the summit in Istanbul in 1999 and the summit in Astana in 2010. These documents clearly state that security is indivisible, that no one has the right to strengthen their security at the expense of others. Further, a particularly important and specific task is that no country, group, or organization has the right to claim dominance in the OSCE space. NATO is doing exactly what is forbidden. It is striving to dominate, and not just to dominate, but to gain more and more members. Everyone knows that we do not want NATO to engage in the security of the entire Eurasian continent. This is exactly the goal that NATO has been proclaiming. Together with the People's Republic of China and other members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, we support the principle of indivisibility and security. Of course, we will be ready to discuss this issue with our American colleagues when their general attitude to the key aspects of what is commonly referred to as strategic stability is clarified. As you know, yesterday the Strategic Offensive Weapons Treaty was ratified and a vacuum was created. Our position was detailed in the special statement that our ministry announced. We will proceed from the fact that Russia is ready for any development of events. Of course, we prefer a dialogue, and we will wait to see whether the United States is ready for this. In general, the OSCE's role in solving security problems and forming a new security architecture was quite interesting. Our interlocutors admit that without the Asian aspect, our joint continental efforts will certainly not be enough. But we still need to see how all this will be depicted. In all three branches of the OSCE's activities, military, political, economic, and humanitarian, there is a complete stagnation or, as I said at the beginning of my speech, Ukrainianization.
По всем трем корзинам деятельности ОБСЕ, военно-политической, экономической, гуманитарной, наблюдается полный застой.
At the same time, the OSCE is completely inactive. Despite the fact that there are special institutions responsible for the rights of national minorities, for the freedom of mass media, and for human rights, these institutions fully prove their incompetence. Our colleagues, especially the Secretary General, Senior Lioglu, actively supported our thesis that it is unacceptable when a structure called the IAEA does not have a charter, and all the institutions that have been formed in this organization act without any universally approved rules. All this despite the fact that the OSCE has adopted the principle of consensus. We need to put this organization in order, especially when it comes to monitoring the elections. There was an indecent situation when 10 observers went to the so-called developed democracies, and hundreds went to the country located to the east of Vienna. When the Human Rights Bureau observed what was happening in Romania during the first round of elections, the candidate who became the leader was simply removed from the race, with the OSCE completely silent. About a year ago, in late March last year, President Trump, in a phone conversation with President Putin, said that we should consider announcing a monthly energy truce, when both sides of the conflict will not attack the energy infrastructure. President Putin immediately agreed to this. We announced this truce, and for a month we did not touch Ukrainian energy facilities. Ukraine, in turn, kept silent about this proposal by Washington, and more than 130 attacks on Russian energy facilities were registered this month. We still follow these rules. We attack only those facilities that have a double or purely military significance. Therefore, when Ukraine says goodbye to everything, and all the blame is placed on the Russian Federation, the press should work honestly and try to defend its profession. No one has shown this to us. Maybe our delegation, which visited Abu Dhabi for the second time, was informed about what was being discussed there. I have not yet had the opportunity to talk to them. Yesterday, we were already in talks with our Swiss colleagues, and we are still in talks this morning. However, what is being said in the press, and what is not being said at all, is that an intervention is being prepared. He said that the security guarantees are provided automatically by the coalition of those who wish to do so. At one stage, it is done on their own, and at another stage, with the support of the United States, that Britain and France are ready to deploy their troops on Ukrainian territory. In other words, everything is exactly the opposite compared to the collective guarantees that we and the Ukrainians agreed on in April 2022. At that time, it was fair. Now, it is a guarantee of the security of the regime that the West wants to preserve at any cost, as long as it continues to bite the Russian Federation.